speed all around.
So who's Gary Hart and why is he infamous?
And action.
I intend, as I always have, to run a campaign of ideas. Gary had searing intellect. He also was a leader in the best sense of the word.
He was this young, charismatic, good-looking guy who brought hope to people for a significantly better future.
I mean, imagine if every school could have a computer, every library, every home.
The story of Gary Hart seemed very relevant for 2018.
You're running for president?
I'm aware of that, Tom. It's in the papers.
Well, you have a responsibility.
I know full well what my responsibilities are. Do you know yours?
At its core, The Frontrunner is about the 3 weeks in which Gary Hart went from the next president of the United States to dropping out of the race. In 1987, there was a moment where a very qualified candidate made some serious mistakes.
I came here today to talk to you about America's future.
And within a few weeks, he found himself in the middle of the night getting questioned by journalists.
I'd like to ask you about the woman that's staying in your townhouse.
No one is staying in my townhouse.
We saw you.
His campaign unraveled in the space of 5 days over a scandal about him being seen with a woman who wasn't his wife. That was really the first of its kind.
There are stories being written right now.
It's gossip, Dix. It'll blow over.
I don't think it's gonna blow over.
Gary, by nature, was a private person, and he understood that voters needed to have confidence in your character and your ability to follow through on what you say you're going to do. But he never felt comfortable with the level of intrusion that was starting to appear.
Hart marked the beginning of an era where there's a media frenzy about nearly any rumored facts that are uncovered about candidates.
Do you feel like you have a traditional marriage?
Follow me around. Put a tail on me. You'd be very bored.
What we depict in the film, the story that it tells, is the story of really this moment in American politics when the worlds of politics and entertainment collided.
And then, you know, it just all came crashing down, and then people were devastated.
The one thing I ever asked was that you don't embarrass me.
All right.
All right, let's go. Pictures up.
This is my 8th movie, and I've come to really love the people I make my movies with.
So many of them are part of this sort of body of movies. I've done 5 now. Others have done 6 and 7. So to keep coming up and be a part of each of Jason's projects makes it feel like a family.
I work with Jason very frequently. He's one of my favorite collaborators that I get to work with.
I've worked on 4 films with Jason before.
We have a library that we can now call on. That's what's in his head. We're all on the same wavelength very quickly.
He hires placement actors before the shoot and places them in the scene and then photographs the images in advance, so you can actually go and see the film and the pictures in order.
It becomes a document as long as a screenplay. All the keys get them, and if you flip through, it feels like you're watching the movie.
Jason Reitman prefers filming on real locations wherever possible, and that's been the case for virtually all of his movies.
The desire was that the audience feel like they were always being dropped into the real situation. Whether you were dropped into the Washington Post, the Miami Herald, into the campaign office, that it felt 100% authentic.
There's a great naturalism to this script and a lot of overlapping conversations and a real sort of nonstop energy, not in a sort of action kind of a way, but in an intellectual way.
2 or 3 things had to be happening at the same time, all the time. And usually the most important piece of dialogue is happening deep in the background where something innocuous is happening in the foreground. Everyone was mic'd. 15 actors would show up every single day, everyone would have their mics, and they were encouraged to talk.
Station. $10 says he misses.
I'm all right, thanks.
I can't believe we're at a fucking excellent contest.
I believe they call it timber sport.
This is a first. He might just actually throw away his campaign. I can't fucking watch this.
If you create the world, then it's very easy to inhabit it. You know, it's very easy to just be there in the midst of it.
We wanted these rooms to feel alive within a world that felt 100% real.
A lot of it is painstakingly built and recreated and sourced, and it's not just to make it feel like the era, but it's to replicate historically important events.
The meat of the movie is these run and gun scenes, many people talking over each other, aides interrupting the main dialogue to ask a question. That's the real juice of this movie. And it's the sort of thing where you have to plan for everything because Jason could point the camera in any direction and suddenly improvise. So you have to be ready to fill the room from end to end.
So we're just sitting around a table talking They give us this daily sort of newsletter that's period appropriate with articles and stuff from 1987 that we all read in our trailers in the morning, and that way we have something to just kind of like toss around to each other and talk about. And then the next thing you know, the camera's moving and you're like, oh shit, we're filming. It's so authentic, like real life, more so than anything I've ever been a part of.
Jason changed things up all the time. When I did all my press conferences in the film, I had no idea who was going to ask me questions or where they would come from.
I've made some mistakes, but I think judgment, like character, needs to be measured in the full context of a career.
I was very nervous to play Gary, but I'm friends with Gary now. I got to know Gary, I read about Gary, I watched tape of Gary, I spent time in Gary's house living with his family. I call him a friend. And I knew, or I hoped, that at some point he was going to sit down and watch the movie that portrayed the worst 3 weeks of his life. So it was a huge responsibility to me, and I wanted him to know that I took it very, very seriously.
When I found out that Hugh Jackman was playing Gary Hart, I was just awestruck.
He's like exactly how you would want somebody to behave who's leading a set.
In addition to being one of the absolute best, he just brings such a positive energy to the set.
Hugh Jackman sort of occurred to everybody because he's such a versatile and terrific actor, because he conveys such gravitas.
I don't think I was prepared for how hard he actually works. He said something to me in prep at one point. He said, I never want to feel as though I could have done more. And that is the truest thing about Hugh Jackman.
These people want to feel outraged for me, but it doesn't belong to them.
It wasn't for the media to condemn him. It was for Lee to condemn him.
Gary and Lee Hart have had to navigate one of the trickiest moments that any marriage has ever had to go through.
I met a woman in Miami.
Lee Hart for Gary was the rock amidst the storm. And the role had possessed these really regal qualities of steadfastness, of commitment, of confidence.
You need to let him deal with this, Mom.
Oh, he will. He will.
The fact is, when everyone else rejected him, she has still stood by him. You know, half the people that had their panties in a knot over this, statistically speaking, are not married to this day.
I need to see my husband.
One of the first things Gary said to me after watching the film was he was so happy with how Vera portrayed Lee, because he describes Lee as the strongest woman he's ever met.
She somehow navigated one of the great political scandals of the last century. And Vera has this power in which she can kind of just shoot a look and make you feel this small, which is how he needed to feel.
Were you thinking of me when you invited her into our home?
Through the lens of feminism, we were supposed to give women the right to choose to do and not judge her for it.
Are you leaving me?
Not yet.
I think what I had to focus on was this notion of a woman just being hit with this psychological sledgehammer and just trying to survive and trying to protect what's most important to her.
Hi, Billy. Hi, Billy.
Hey, darling.
When I would tell people that I was doing the Gary Hart story, they'd go, monkey business. She was the girl on the boat.
Donna Rice was known for being part of the Gary Hart scandal. She allegedly had this affair with Senator Gary Hart and took down his entire presidential campaign.
Wanted a job with the campaign.
I think Donna Rice is perhaps the most misunderstood character in this story.
You think I'm some stupid bimbo?
I really sympathize with Donna because this was a person who tried really hard in her real life to be taken seriously and to not be seen as just some like pretty model.
I did all the things I was supposed to do to make sure that men don't look at me the way that you're looking at me right now.
She is someone who was misportrayed immediately and is someone whose life was thrown off course more than anyone in this story.
Her life has been ostensibly stolen from her.
The story broke and she was isolated and questioned for hours and told that everything was gonna be okay, and then they just sent her on her way with no help.
There's a driver downstairs waiting. He'll take you wherever you need to go.
Thank you. To just be trapped with that label forever, I don't think the press treated her fairly.
I just keep thinking this is never going to be over for her.
The theme that all the women in the movie have together is that they're all having to hold, they're carrying a burden from this event.
One thing I'm very proud of the movie, I think, in the way it handles all the female characters and the way it shines a light on the female stories. And it doesn't give you easy answers necessarily, but I think it really makes you think and even question your own assumptions at the beginning of the movie about who Donna Rice was.
J.K. Simmons is the human being that I constantly aspire to be.
It's always great to get back with Jason and his team now, you know, who've been together for several films, and it's like a well-oiled machine.
This movie was a rare opportunity to work with some actors I already had worked with and loved. And then, of course, I don't know a single director who hasn't dreamt of working with Alfred Molina, and I finally got the chance on this film.
He comes with great energy. Like, he was very generous with the actors in terms of whatever they brought to the table. He was very generous with his crew, very kind of inclusive. He created a very pleasant atmosphere.
New Year's Eve after Jack died, Lyndon Johnson sits down with a whole bunch of us, pulls us in close and says, "Boys, you're gonna see a whole lot of women coming in and out of my hotel suites. I want you to pay us the same courtesy you did Jack."
This campaign is about the future, not rumors, not sleaze, and I care about the sanctity of this process.
I feel like there's before Gary Hart and after Gary Hart. You know, nothing in American politics has been the same.
Gary Hart entered a moment that he could have never seen coming. You have a generation of journalists who have grown up watching Woodward and Bernstein become celebrities, played by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman.
Wow, if you can take somebody down, you can win prizes and be famous. Maybe they'll make a movie about you. Turns out they will.
A current affair has just gone on the air. Satellite trucks are now pervasive. CNN is giving satellite phones to all their correspondents.
Now there was a voracious appetite for stories, and once a story was on, you wouldn't let go.
Suddenly you can go live anywhere at any time, and when you can go live, it becomes a little more like a soap opera. You got to keep people in their seats minute to minute. And you really have changing attitudes in the culture about adultery.
Senator, have you ever committed adultery? He doesn't really answer the question, which is a huge misstep, and then everyone bounces on that.
I guess I don't think that is a fair question.
It destroyed his run for presidency, and many people felt that he could have won and was extremely qualified.
This is one of those first spark moments where you see people at the Miami Herald, people at the Washington Post, trying to figure out where the story actually is and what people should know.
They want us to hold for a day. Why? Just so we can get our shit straight, maybe get the girl's name?
Can't. We lose half the readers.
We can't do it. We can't do it.
The idiot says, "Follow me around," and then goes and fucks his mistress.
It was a throwaway line. They're using it after the fact to justify their tabloid bullshit.
Journalists now more than ever are being forced to ask questions you don't want to ask, knowing information you're not sure whether you should tell. And this blurring of the lines between gossip journalism and political journalism.
It certainly started the trend of, like, this is more entertainment than actual newsworthy reporting. Can I ask you about your separation?
It's really common occurrence. I'd avoid it if you can.
Look,
Why should anybody care?
Maybe some of us. We feel that way.
Reporters.
He's investigating this very particular moment in history where politics turned tabloids, and it has become the American way of politics.
It was free-flowing and felt very realistic, and always juggling its point of view so that you as the audience, filmically as well as philosophically, get to decide what is important and what you want to follow.
It's not something that's taking sides or telling the audience how to feel, how to think. And there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of really witty repartee going on.
Is this a steakhouse? No, we ran out of gas.
And it also feels very human. You see the chaos, you see the mistakes, you see the flaws, and there is no hero and no villain. And ultimately, I think what it does is, rather than give you easy answers of should he or shouldn't he have been president, it asks you questions as an audience about what is interesting and what is important.
It's all about context.
I think the movie does a really nice job of sort of bringing all of that together so that you see it.
He is a man with power and opportunity, and that takes certain responsibility.
Someone will dredge up something you said in a moment 15 years ago and act like it somehow encapsulates your life.
We're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes. And we have to ask ourselves, what flaws do we want in our leaders? What flaws are we willing to put up with?
These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, especially as we contemplate how do we elect the next president.
Politics in this country, take it from me, is on the verge of becoming another form of athletic competition or sport. We'd all better do something to make the system work.